All right, so people are streaming in. Welcome, everybody. If you want to just pop a hello in the chat as you're coming in, see the chat function at the bottom of your screen. So say hello. Let us know you're here. Hi, Seth. Great to have you on the call. We were just talking before you guys started streaming in about life in the pandemic, and I was reflecting. I don't know if you're finding this, Beth, but I'm rotating through the same 3 outfits all the time, so saving my wardrobe a lot of wear and tear.
Actually, we just picked up some dry cleaning yesterday that was sort of, winter business attire that I had forgotten that we had left at the dry cleaner in early March. So we got it yesterday. I was like, no, I forgot I had that. Don't know when I'm going to wear it again, but.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I should actually start thinking about getting my winter jacket dry clean, because I always feel like I miss that window every year. Maybe this is the year that I actually will get it done in advance. It's not good. Oh, I love that tip, Steph. Yeah, wear a fancy scarf. Great hack to hide t-shirts. That's a good one. Hi, Jen. Great to have you here. Oh, thank you. Yes, I got bangs, or as I like to refer to it, French Botox, to hide those wearing lines of wrinkle. Yeah, I don't know about bangs, though. Anybody who's gone into the whole bangs territory, it's kind of it's a dark place as they're getting longer now. I'm feeling.
Especially in the pandemic, you start to have to do them
yourselves. You know what? All these little things that we appreciate, right? So I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes. I know we had a number of people signed up today, so I'm going to just let people keep streaming in. So yeah, hi, Gabriella, Gabby, as I know you. Great to have you here. Yeah, Jen says her daughter asked for bangs right before the pandemic, lots of trimming. Yes, my daughter has done the same and offered to trim mine, which I have politely declined her support. Hi, Tony. Hi, Zev. Great to have you here, Zev. Sula, welcome. Yeah, pop in, say hello. We're going to have this be just as you guys are streaming in, just to let you know, again, I'm going to give it another 30 seconds and I think we will get started, because I know this is a meaty topic. We have a lot of interest today. I'll just remind you, we're going to have the sound muted, so keep muted, but feel free to use the chat. There's also a Q&A function. As we're going through, the plan is I've given Beth a few questions for her to ponder around this topic, but then like any roundtable event, it really is always about what you guys want to hear. So as we're starting to go through, what I'd love you to start to think about a little bit is, what would you like to specifically know about? And so you can start posting those into the chat function or the Q&A, whichever is easier for you. So welcome, everybody. So I think what we'll do is we're going to get started. I had a little quote that I found that I thought might fit the bill. All great changes are preceded by chaos. Certainly, it feels like we are in chaos today. So we are going to be recording this call for those who may have missed it. I'm going to stop sharing so I can get right back into the panel here. And Beth, welcome. I know when you and I were talking about, because we've done things together before, and we were talking about what could we talk about that would be useful for people. And I think, I think it was through the course of our conversation that you said, this is really about thriving in chaos. And I thought, this is exactly where we're at right now. So everybody, I think you've seen probably Beth's bio. I will give you a couple of highlights, and then Beth, maybe I'll get you to tell us a little bit about where you're at these days. But so Beth Tyndall, she is the Chief People Officer with Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. I always have to stop myself from saying board, because that's what it used to be called, but Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. And Beth, congratulations as well on just being named one of the top 50 executives in Canada by the Globe and Mail Report on Business. So we're excited to have you here for that. And in case you didn't know, Beth also leads a fantastic HR team that was named the top HR team in Canada by the Canadian HR Awards last year as well. So we have somebody who knows her business, as we like to say, joined teachers from Deloitte, and so has not only just the view of working in an organization, but also a very macro view on the space of people and talent. So why don't you tell us a little bit, give us a bit of a 411 on teachers for maybe people who aren't familiar with teachers, and on what's kind of keeping you up at night these days, what's kind of on your radar in terms of priorities, so that we get a bit of context.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the intro, and it's fun to be here. So for those who don't know, Ontario Teachers Pension Plan is a pension plan focused with a single member, being the Teachers of Ontario. So it is obvious in the name, but we have 3 offices with a 4th to open soon. So we're based here in Toronto. We also have an office in London and Hong Kong, and we are very close to opening an office in Singapore as well. We own a number of portfolio companies, about 100 portfolio companies. We have over $200 billion in assets under management. So it's a very complex organization, about 1,500 employees and contractors, with the majority of them based here in Toronto. What keeps me up at night? What doesn't keep me up at night these days? Lots of things. I have the role and the opportunity to co-lead the crisis management team. So not every crisis has its people at the forefront, but this one certainly does. And so myself and our general counsel are the co-leads. And we have a crisis management team that we mobilized at the beginning of the pandemic. And I think where we've been focused has shifted over time and evolved over time. Right now, it is thinking through the plans for the fall. What's the timing for people to start coming back into the office? Like most organizations, the majority of our people have been at home since March. We have different complexities in different offices. So we've actually had our Hong Kong office that has returned twice, but are now at home based on the wave of their pandemic out there. So, but lots to think about in terms of returning, but also thinking more importantly around the longer term. So what is the work environment, the future of work that makes sense for teachers, right? And the mental health of our employees and a whole bunch of things. So lots to keep me up at night.
I'm sure there are many on the call. Now, I know many of you joining us in the call. We've got a bit of a mix here. We've got people from our HR exchange community, so welcome to everybody there. And those of you who are Roundtable graduates, welcome to you. And I know we've got some new folks who are new to the Roundtable as well. So welcome, everybody. And what I wanted to really sort of start with, at the Roundtable, really focused on leadership. And I was joking around with you, I think, when we were talking, like, yeah, so did you get the leader's handbook on how to handle a pandemic, right? Because I didn't get mine. Where's mine? So talk to us a little bit, for you, what's the journey been like as a leader through this? Often we look up above, and I think sometimes for those below, they think everybody, like, more senior people have this stuff all figured out, but give us a bit of a flavor for your own personal journey to set us off.
Yeah, so I think we've had good days and bad days, and one of the themes that I think is important is that leaders are people too, just for the most simplistic, and so you've got your own personal things that you're dealing with, circumstances, and then you also have the additional responsibility for leading others through a crisis, and in this case, one that appears to have a very long tail. And so, I am human like everybody else. I've had some good days where you feel like you've really accomplished a lot, you've really connected, you're doing the right thing, and other days where you're second guessing decisions, or you're thinking about, are we focusing on the right things? I think it's been the pattern. But as I talk to lots of other leaders and lots of other people, I don't think that that's inconsistent with where others have been as well, right? The Corona coaster, or whatever you hear it referred to as.
Yeah, it really does. It really has felt like such an emotional roller coaster for everybody these days, right? Like I think a lot of people, to your point, there's days where you feel like, okay, I did the right thing today. I was feeling good. I'm feeling like I'm making progress. And then other days, I know for myself, I was talking to a colleague last week where I don't know where my motivation was. It was completely gone. And I think that's the layer, though, as leaders, that is the other layer, in that we need to bring that energy even when inside we're not feeling it. And that can often be a big challenge for people. So how have you sort of managed your own sort of, when you are having those days where your own internal piece isn't quite as aligned as you want it to be or need it to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's putting a frame on the leadership side. There are days where you think, I'm not really up to having this call right now.
Yes.
But you also know that the people on the other end of the call might be really looking forward to it. And I always remind myself at the end of the call, whatever it is about, that I probably did get something out of it. And so it's sort of that keep going. For me, I think it's recognizing that you can't go it alone. It can be really isolating to be a leader at this time. And there have been days where I'm not up to it. I have a co-lead for our crisis management team. And there are days where I've called him and said, like, can you take the lead on this call? Because I don't have the energy, or I'm not feeling as connected to this particular topic. And I think just being honest about that. And it's amazing to me how through other crises I've dealt with, including this one, people do want to help, and they do rally for the great, for sort of the collective, if you will. And one of the things I know about teachers for sure is our people are really committed to the mission of the organization. And they're committed to one another. We've assessed our population, if you will, and one of the strongest traits is fraternity. So people want to work together and they want to help one another, and that really comes through. So you know that actually by needing help, sometimes you're helping others because you're allowing them to have that opportunity, right?
Yeah, there's so many things I want to unpack in there, and so I'm gonna start with maybe this piece that you just talked about, which is this culture that was already in place at teachers that's really allowed you to come through this. I mean, what do you notice about that? Because I think one of the things we've noticed with our clients is the ones where the culture was really solid, and they had certain aspects, because you can have a solid culture that's terrible, but aspects of the culture that were very productive, they were really able to make the transition into working from home and dealing with the uncertainty in a much easier way, it appears, than some other folks that maybe that wasn't quite as cemented. What would you say about that culture within teachers that you think has allowed you to come through? I mean, you talk about the fraternity, but how do things like that get cultivated, and any sort of insights around that would be great.
I think a crisis has the opportunity to strengthen culture or destroy it. And there's no question about that. We've had, if I think about the van attack crisis in Toronto, that was at our doorstep, and so very personal to the people of teachers. When we went through that crisis, we absolutely took a people first approach. And so it was around, obviously, the safety of our people. And once we knew that that was protected, it was looking after, mental health and support and all of the rest of it. So there's a bit of a pattern there, and that really helped to stabilize and secure the feeling and the connection I think our people have to the organization, and knowing that they will be taken care of. And so this was no different. And the messaging that we came out with the help of our incredible communications team, because honestly couldn't have done any of this without them, they really were able to create and strengthen that voice of the leadership to be able to focus on our people's safety first. And we're acting out of an abundance of caution. We will share facts, right? Not guesses. When we have information, we will share it. And so kind of repeating some of those pieces allowed us to strengthen the trust with our employee base. So it was there. It was always there, but it's kind of taken it to a new level.
Yeah, and that really grounding of that muscle, that people, like what you said, that people first approach, right? Like if you've never done that muscle before,
Right.
and you get hit with something, that's going to be a whole new way of being that, leaders across the organization have to show up with. But if
Exactly.
you have been sort of practicing that, so it's always good to practice these things when we're not in the middle of a crisis.
Yeah.
The other thing that you said that I really want to kind of pick up on, because I do think sometimes, there's so many things that we have in organizations that are like, don't let them see you sweat, like as a leader, you've got to have it all together. And there's all these things, right, that we put out there. And yet what I loved about what you said about, I have a partner, don't go it alone. And this, what you made me think of in that moment, like when you're able to say to somebody and be vulnerable enough to say to a colleague or a peer or whoever, I'm not fully there yet. It really reminded me of Brene Brown on one of her podcasts talked about this idea of a gap. And with your spouse being able to come home at the end of the day and say, I'm at 20% today. So
Right.
like, where are you at? And how do we make up 100 for our family? Because this notion of it being 50-50 all the time is a myth. Like, partnership is not, sometimes you're going to be 20%, sometimes you're going to be 70%. And I think that, our willingness as leaders to be open with where we're at on that scale, like today I'm at 20%. And I need somebody, like, how are we as a team going to create that 100? Is a really interesting thought. Like, is that something for you, this notion of being open and being vulnerable? Is that something that's always sort of been part of who you are as a leader? Is that something that you had to learn along the way?
It's probably a bit of both, to be honest. I think I tend to be more on the vulnerable side, on the open side. And I'm very much a relationship person. And so that I've built relationships through just, being real. That said, I also learned early on, I would say the first real crisis that I was ever faced with as a leader was 9/11.
Yeah.
And, we've talked about this before. I learned a lot from that. And that was almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And while I was probably vulnerable stylistically, I don't think I had the same self-awareness of the need for balance that I have today. And
now we touched on that, and I'd love you to go there, because what we talked about when we were chatting through that was this idea of burning yourself out.
Yes.
Right, and I know both of us over the course of our career have had those experiences where we've burnt ourselves out. So tell us a little bit about what's different for you going through this than when you look back on that. Because I think I agree with you, like 9/11 was probably my closest experience to what we've gone through here. Would love to hear, what's the hindsight 2020 that you've gained that's allowing you not to burn out in this point?
A couple things. I think, it was such a shock to the world, and I was working for an organization that was, we had somebody in one of the towers, so we did lose an employee, and an office in New York. So, there was it was very real for our organization. I think for, what am I trying not to do this time that I did back then? I went it alone. Right. And I had this sense of responsibility. I wasn't as senior then in that organization. My boss happened to be in a small village in India visiting his family when all of this went down. So de facto became the person to lead them through. And I don't think I recognized my own signs of burnout. And I don't think that I think I felt so responsible for touching base with every single person who was impacted and taking care of them that I actually completely forgot to take care of me.
Yeah.
So this time, and I've had a couple of interim things between there that I've learned from as well. I recognize that this is a long journey. And there are going to be days where I don't have the energy and I'm tired, and that it is okay to reach out to a colleague or a team member to help you. And I'm better at recognizing the signs of burnout in myself than I was 20 years ago.
So for people on the call, because I think one of the things that I know, so it might be our community, so those of you on the line, I'm talking about you right now. The type A personality that tends to be in a lot of our programs, I find that it's almost like in hindsight we see the burnout.
Mhm.
In hindsight, we see, oh, this is where I was at. So give me a bit of a flavor for how do you know when you're starting to hit that slippery slope? What are some of the things that you notice about yourself? And then as somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about talent and looking at talent,
Mhm.
are there some kind of global patterns that, we need to start to be aware of, especially for those who are on the call that are maybe earlier stage career, who might still
Mhm.
be in that, mode that
Yeah.
we've been in?
Yeah. I think one of the principles that we've applied with our workforce is one size fits no one. And I think that that's also true in the sense of burnout. So we've actually provided all kinds of resources to our employees around recognizing the signs of burnout, but
Yeah,
everybody's a little different.
yeah,
So for me, it's waking up in the middle of the night, not getting back to sleep.
yeah.
It is just being grumpy. I'm a pretty optimistic, generally pretty happy,
Mm,
person. But if I find myself like my inner thoughts are like, a little bit grumpy, to me, that's burnout. That's when I
yeah,
have to step away. I need a
yeah,
break, or I need to schedule a day off, or something.
yeah,
But for others, it could be something different, right?
yeah.
And what makes this environment challenging is that as leaders, we see the people that are closest to us. So for me, that's our executive team, and we talk every day. And it's my leadership team that report directly into me. But the ability to connect further into the organization and into my own team is much more limited. So
Mm,
then you have to rely on other people to recognize those signs too. And you don't get to look at the whites of their eyes
yeah.
and ask them, how are you doing?
Mhm.
So that's a challenge with everybody being remote.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the thing that you talk about that like earlier on in this pandemic, I remember hearing somebody, and I'm going to forget where I heard it now, but it was this idea that with the pandemic, we're in the same storm, but we're all
Yeah,
in different boats. And
yeah.
I think there's something about globally, like we've never had this experience where the entire world is going
Hmm.
through this at the same time, and yet, when we work with the folks that we work with, it's a very different pressure. I have a 16-year-old. That's very different than having twin toddlers running around under your feet trying to work
Definitely.
from home during a pandemic. And I think
Yeah.
one of the things that I love this idea of one size fits no one, because one of the things that I think leaders have to be hyper aware of is
Hmm.
this checking in, right? And what I've also noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed the same thing, is that it can change week to week. Somebody
Absolutely.
could be okay last week, and this week it's actually they've hit the wall again.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It can change within the day. It
100%. And
depends on what's happening during the day.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so I'm curious, like how are you, or how are leaders, and how are you sort of supporting leaders at teachers in
Mm.
having these sort of more frequent touch points, or making that part of the leadership DNA? Are there any things that you guys are thinking about doing, or have been doing, or that's been working pretty well in monitoring this?
Yeah, there's a number of things that we've done and that we are doing. I think first and foremost, we've had weekly calls since this started, and through the summer we've shifted them to bi-weekly for all of our employees.
Mm,
And that's generally our executive team. We answer questions, and questions come in, and we kind of give them, here's the state of the nation in terms of where we're at today. And then we alternate those with calls with the Cleveland Clinic. And so we've struck
mm,
a partnership with the Cleveland Clinic. There's been a big focus on those calls, not exclusively mental health, but there has been a big focus on mental health, and that's been, I think, really helpful for our employees. And we have a large number of them who continue to come on to the calls, so I think that they're getting some value.
mm,
My team has also mobilized on some leadership tips. They've had little, call it, management team interventions, if you will, where they've gone into management teams and they've talked to their teams around leading in uncertain times and self-care, and generally how are things doing, to help the leaders recognize that, you know, it is their responsibility, but also to help them with, because many of them, you know, have never done this before. None of us have
Right.
ever done this before. So,
Yeah.
so there's been a little bit of a mobilization through the People and Culture team. We also have a COVID hub on our intranet, which has an unbelievable wealth of information on from everything from staying fit during a pandemic to, you know, recipes, because everyone went through that bread phase. That was very
Yeah.
bizarre. Anyway, lots of people were making bread.
Banana
There's a
bread.
lot of talk about bread. You know, mental health, homeschooling, leadership tips, ergonomics, etc. And again, our communications team and our group focused on wellness sort of pulled those things together. And then I think that, you know, one of the other things that we try to do on our weekly calls is just lead by example.
Yeah.
So we had a couple of, I can't remember what we call them, unplugged. So the executive team on video, and it's a little bit more sharing and honesty, quite frankly, and vulnerability. You know, this is what's working, this is what's not working, this is what I missed, this is what's frustrating me, this is what I'm thinking about, and to try to set the example that leaders are people too. And so yes, we're tasked with leading the organization, but we have to lead ourselves as well. And I think that's been helpful.
Yeah, and so hearing and Gabby, thanks for your question about the question about mental health. And I think you know, Beth, you've given us sort of a good overview of some of the mental health supports, because that is really hitting people in a very big way. You know, the uncertainty, the stress, the anxiety, job insecurity for a lot of people. I know for young working parents, there's been so much pressure on them. And I think for a lot of people, we're going to have a second wave of that as we look at what is going to be happening at school, you know, in September. So I'm sure there's going to be a second wave coming for that. Any other sort of specific mental health pieces? Or the other thing I'm kind of curious about is, you know, on that, on the note of mental health, like one of the things I think is we're going to have to get real comfortable talking about this stuff in organizations. Right?
Yes.
So I'm kind of curious on how you're seeing the conversation about mental health changing, advancing as well in organizations. What could you share with us about that?
So we had a wellness strategy that we had put together for kind of 2020 and 2021, and let's just say it's been accelerated substantially. So one of the things that I'm proudest of our organization for doing is that we have substantially increased the financial support for mental health. So we've expanded the definition, and we've removed some of the limits, and we've increased the allotment for our people. And it does two things, right? It actually helps them, but it also, when you put a financial investment behind a statement, it helps to reduce the stigma. Because it says what's important. So we've done that, we've implemented that, and that was sort of launched the beginning of July.
That's great.
We've also implemented a 24/7 medical access tool called Akira. And so you can do virtual, you know, if you need a prescription filled, or you've got some symptoms, or you need an x-ray booked, or what have you, don't want to physically go into a doctor's office, you can go through this app, and that's available to everybody. But it also has a big focus on mental health. And then of course we have our employee family assistance provider. So we've got lots of support provided to our people. We also have an employee resource group. We have 4 employee resource groups, and one of them is on abilities, but the focus for 2020 was on mental health. And so we've run some panels where we've had some incredibly courageous employees and leaders who have shared their journeys. They've talked about their path with, you know, whether it was depression or anxiety or so on. We've had huge number of people who have participated to listen. But that also helps. There's nothing like a leader talking about their own struggles to start to reduce the stigma. So it's I would say, fairly early in the journey. We're doing a lot, but we can't take our foot off the gas on this, because this is going to have a long tail as well, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really the big thing is that I saw something yesterday that we're going to be in this for 2 to 3 years,
Yeah.
um, which is a very long time. So there's a question that's just come in. It's about the young parents piece, and this is such an interesting one to me. So question is, how has teachers helped young parents during the pandemic to maintain their productivity while managing their kids at home? So what have you done around that?
So one of the things that we have done is we have we always have a large number of projects, and it could be IT projects or it could be finance projects, etc. And we took a look at all of the projects that we had on our plate and prioritized them. Really had a concerted effort to go through each and every one and think about the priorities to make sure that we were focusing first and foremost on the retirement security of our members, right? Like that mission for us is so clear. But what that also did was that allowed our leaders to have conversations with their teams on, so you had these 10 things. Now we think you need to focus on these 6, or we had 5 and you want to focus on these 2. And we're still working through some of that. I think in the back half of the year, we need to do some more about that. In some parts of our business, we actually altered work hours. So we have a contact center, which is our professionals who speak to the members and deal with our members. And we looked at scheduling there. We were getting some feedback from that team around things that were working and things that weren't working, and tried to do our best to accommodate, again, making sure that our service levels were still at the level that we hold ourselves accountable for, but also allowing for our teams to have some flexibility. And so a big focus on flexibility with my team, again, spending time with these smaller teams to really think about what's working for individuals and what's not working for individuals. Some teams have shifted meeting times. It's really about the conversation. If you need to be at home because your spouse is, has a busy time in the morning and your busy time is the afternoon, let's try to shift our meetings to accommodate and keep the dialogue open. So it's a work in progress. I think it's probably not perfect in every part of the organization, but it's a dialogue that we continue to have.
Yeah, I do think that this is where, as organizational leaders, we have a huge opportunity right now. I think if anything, we know work wasn't working before for many, many companies, right? And that we had people that were burning out. We've seen people in our communities refusing promotions because they don't want the additional workload that goes along with it. I talked to so many leaders that are sick of the number of meetings that they have in their organizations. Like, what we were doing wasn't working. So I do think it's like a pivot point right now where we can say, do we try and go back in post-pandemic and retrofit into that old culture and old way of doing things? Or do we actually, do what Edward de Bono would say was like, break it all out and then figure out where you want to go? And I think there is such a huge opportunity right now to get away from the time-based mentality we have about work. You have to be there 9 to 5 and in your desk from 9 to 5, and this is when work happens, it's 9 to 5. We've been really challenged on that with so many companies were so traditional about, well, people need to be in an office to get work done. Well, we've kind of blown that out of the water, right? And so now I think there is such a great thing to now reframe ourselves around results, which is what you said. What are the results we're trying to drive towards? And then how do those results need to get done? And that gets us away from this thinking of time. And I think what I see with the folks that are in our programs that they wrestle with, especially those young parents, is that this feeling that they need to be available between 9 and 5. If we stop the time conversation and we said instead, what do you need to be delivering on and what are the results you need to be delivering on and how you do that, I don't care. So if you decide that you're going to be offline from 8 to 2 and you're going to be doing your work from 3 to 9 because that's what works for you and your family, who cares, right? But it's like we have to start, I think, really changing that conversation and getting focused on outcomes. Not on physical presence and where you are between a certain arbitrary industrial age time thing. What do you think of that when I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, we have we're a pretty quantitative organization, which shouldn't be a surprise given we're a venture fund. And, you know, so we've got scorecards and they're really focused on outcomes and achieving. And that's definitely the conversation that we've had with our team, which is, you know, here's what we need you to do, and kind of how you do it is really up to you, and everybody's going to be a little bit different. It becomes trickier as you work through the organization, and I think that's where we've got more work to do. I completely agree that that's a shift that we need to make. But it is a mindset shift to move away from that. This is my job from here to here.
Yeah.
Now, in some cases, we do have parameters where, you know, you've got trade life cycle, or you've got the contact center that's open, and so on. But I still think that there's the ability to have flexibility within a frontline office, and that's really looking at sort of the team approach. And I think our leaders there have done a good job of pivoting. But there's no question, more conversation needs to happen, and I think depends on the individual leader.
It's
so much of it comes
100%.
down to the individual leader.
I think the hardest thing I've sort of observed in myself, because I enjoy leading a team. I like being in control. I like having all of that. There's a letting go of control that has to happen when you start to say to people, yeah, you're responsible for your results. And you also have to be very good at giving feedback and very good at setting expectations. Yeah. And not everybody is, right? So I think there is a big shift and way that we need to tool ourselves up as leaders. I want to circle back. There's a few questions and comments that are coming up around psychological safety. And, you know, and what you've been sharing with us, it really does sound like, you know, at teachers, from the executive team down, there is this willingness to be vulnerable, to be open, to be candid, which, you know, is one of the kind of pieces of being able to create a psychologically safe environment. I am guessing that on this call, and based on some of the comments and questions I'm seeing, there's probably some organizations where it isn't quite like that. And I'm curious whether or not you have any sort of ideas or suggestions on what can leaders do who may be more in the middle of the organization, where maybe that isn't being role modeled at the top, or you want to sort of, you know, create more of this space for people to be able to share their concerns. What are things that like an individual leader could do with their team, or on a more macro level if you don't have that at the top? Curious about that.
I think a lot of psychological safety comes down to belonging, and kind of feeling that you have a place, and that you're, you know, valued for who you are, the skills that you bring to the organization, and that your contribution matters. And I think that the leaders who create that kind of belonging, or psychological safety, are the ones who are able to really connect with the individuals on their team and understand them, and just seek to understand. And I also think it's important to make mistakes and to admit when you've made a mistake, like to be accountable for it. Because if you're not making a mistake, it's like what you tell your children when they're small, like you learn from the mistakes. If you're not making mistakes as a leader, or then you're probably not, you know, pushing it as far as you can, or you may not be being honest with yourself. And I think a lot of the environment that is created, that has a lot of safety in it, is when they see leaders making mistakes and owning them. Yeah. And that's not a, you know, fall on the sword kind of approach, but it's like, you know what, I thought we were going in this direction and I actually don't think it's the right one, or we probably made that decision too early, or and then you take accountability for that. And that creates an environment where you build trust with your teams. And then they feel like they're comfortable in making mistakes, as long as they own it and they, you know, figure out how they're going to rectify the issue, right? I think that's a big piece of it.
Yeah, and I think what it makes me think of is years and years ago when Marcus Buckingham and Kirk Kaufman came out with their book, First Break All the Rules. One of the ahas I had as a young manager then was this notion that you can have all kinds of dysfunction around you, but your team could be actually knocking it out of the park. And I think sometimes people use it as an excuse. Well, this isn't how we operate here, and so therefore I can't be this way.
Yep. Yep.
And I don't buy that. Like, I've seen leaders that are highly courageous. They allow failure in their organizations, because that like, if we, like, I often hear people say we want to be a more innovative culture, and yet the last guy that failed was out the door 2 months later. And you have to sort of look at what can you control within your own backyard, right? So if your organization isn't doing these things, what can you do as a leader, and how can you start to lean in and demonstrate the things that you're talking about, and not use it as a bit of a crutch?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there can be a tendency to, push it up the line. And I think that the strongest leaders are the ones who recognize that there's a line, but aren't limited by that, right? They're the ones that are taking, as you say, sort of taking the accountability and thinking, so here's my span of control. This is my team. And this is the deliverable. These are the deliverables that we're focused on, providing to the organization or the clients or what have you. And here's what we can control. And the best leaders know how to do that. They also know how to get the strengths out of their team. So it's really, again, kind of that one size fits no one. Like, who are you as an individual? What makes you tick? What are your strengths? What are the things that you don't love doing? Where do you get tripped up? What makes you want to come into work? And then how does that match up with the next person and the next person on this team, so that I, as the leader, can pull on each of the strengths of my team, and then everybody can shine. And I think our the strongest leaders know how to do that.
Yeah. I mean, and I think in many organizations, I think teachers, you guys are more sophisticated, and I know, having known several people over the years that have been there, have always had a good focus on people. Like, it's been part of the culture within there for a long time. And so I think in companies where, if you're promoting people who are technically strong but don't necessarily have the kind of the behaviors or mindsets that we need today to be good leaders, all the things you're talking about, the self-awareness, a lot of it is about self-awareness and understanding how to have these kinds of coaching conversations with your employees. We also have to kind of unpack, like, what are we requiring of our leaders? And that's one of the questions that's come in from Sula, which is, for the emerging leaders in your organization, how are you finding their views and expectations of what it means to be a leader being shaped by the crisis?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. My hope is that our emerging leaders are recognizing that the values of the organization drive many of your decisions, or all of your decisions, and that's important. And I think over the last couple of years we've placed a stronger emphasis on leadership behaviors and developing that muscle and those skills. And how does that, how do you again, this sort of strengths-based approach to leadership that we talk about, and that. And I also think that the emerging leaders, when we're looking at how people move in the organization, and as we have sort of spots available, if you will, we look at their ability to lead talent. So you've got your technical depth and your capabilities and your skills and expertise, but it also matters a lot about your leadership acumen and your learning agility, and are you espousing the values of the organization?
Yeah, all those things that we call soft skills, right? It's the part.
They're not so soft.
They're not soft. I would say they're the hard skills. They're the really hard skills. So, and that's kind of a nice segue into Marina's question, which is, her question is, looking ahead, what do you see as positive outcomes or side effects of this crisis on the work culture in the future? With your crystal ball, what are you predicting?
Probably some of the things we've talked about. I think the focus and attention on mental health and the destigmatization of mental health will be a positive outcome. We may see an increase in sort of usage and individuals who are impacted, but let's not kid ourselves. Mental health challenges, many people have been, suffering in silence for decades. So I think that is one positive outcome where organizations were trending in that direction. At least the strongest ones seem to be trending in that direction. I think this has accelerated the path.
Yeah.
And I do think the other piece around flexibility, to me, there's a huge linkage between flexibility and inclusion. And inclusion, speaks to psychological safety and belonging and so on, but there's also a diversity element of that. Yeah. And so if one size fits no one and we want to create the best possible workplace for the future, that is really around creating an environment that allows all of our people to do their best work and reach their potential. And so aspirationally, that would be a pretty flexible work environment, right? Because my needs are different than your needs, are different than the next person's needs.
Yeah.
And that's really, how do we shift and shape the conversations so that we have more flexibility in our work environment. So ultimately we maximize our inclusion and therefore, engagement, productivity, etc.
What do you think are going to be some of the biggest barriers to getting there?
I think that shifting cultures and changing mindsets takes a lot of time. I'm really curious to see what the new Generation Z, brings to us, right, as they've just started to enter the workforce. And, I hate to categorize demographics, like I'm Gen X, but, maybe some of the things are true and some of the things aren't true, right? So,
oh, come on, we're bitter.
But at the same time, you think about these Gen Z kids and the ones that are just entering, university now or still in high school, like they will experience this pandemic in a very different way. And I think that, the resiliency that will come from that and the agility that comes from that and the focus on mental health and well-being and balance, like I have to think that that's going to play out in a very positive way. So, we will be, as we get the cohorts coming in to organizations, we will be forced, if we want to be competitive, we will be forced to think about the needs of those newcomers. And I think they're going to build a whole bunch of skills and capabilities that, quite frankly, none of us have seen before. And, resilient leaders who can manage through organizational change, because I don't think the change part's going away. Those are the ones that we want to cultivate. So I'm quite excited, albeit, as the mother of two teenagers, it's been hard to watch at times. I am excited for the future, even though, yes, they may graduate in a recession and all of these things. I think that there's going to be a whole bunch of resilience that comes through this generation that will have huge positive impact on future leaders.
I agree. And I think this generation is going to lead so differently. I think it's going to really challenge what we think leadership looks like, and sounds like. And I think for those of us who sit in talent, it's going to really, challenge our notions of what will the success requirement look like in the future, because we're still kind of, let's face it, we're still kind of leaning onto a bit of a hierarchical model, and we're not super comfortable with a highly collaborative. I mean, when you look at the movements towards self-management, holacracy, these kinds of systems, there's a lot of resistance to it, because you know what, for people like us and, being Gen X, we've kind of got, I feel like we've got our foot in two camps.
Yeah.
And
it's used to a certain way.
Yeah, and we're used to a certain way, and that's what's comfortable, right? And I love this sort of thing too about, because I think inclusion, is this other big conversation. And I know for myself as a white woman, I have been doing a ton of educating lately myself. And you recognize, somebody said to me, oh, I'm not a biased person. I said, if you have a brain, you have a bias. Like
Yeah,
you cannot,
okay.
you cannot think that you don't. And so this is like these conversations, whether it's a bias towards mental health, whether it's a bias towards, you know, people of different genders, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, whatever it is, we all have these biases. And I think it's fabulous that in organizations that we're actually starting to confront and have some of these conversations that have been buried for, you know, for years. Right.
I think what this has also done is, you know, the work relationship, the relationship you have with the workplace traditionally has been like, I go and I do my job and I work and I get paid and I come home and then I have my personal life.
Yeah.
And I'm finding, because people are in everybody's living rooms all day long, backyards, cottages, you know, kids in the background, spouses in the background, etc. It's melded the environments, and I think that's actually a positive thing.
Yeah.
You know, I think while, you know, you start to reshift in your mind, what's the contract I have with my employer?
Yeah.
And actually it's starting to open up a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's quite an interesting phenomenon as well.
Yeah, I was chuckling the other day. Do you remember that CNN interview where the guy was on the interview and all of his toddlers busted into the room and his wife was like scrambling frantically? I mean, do you remember that was like that wouldn't even make a blip on social media.
No, that's every day.
That's every day. We're all going through that every single day, right? So I think we're seeing a lot of changes, a lot more of this, you know, integration between the two worlds. And in many ways that's balancing out the contract. Because I think as being a product of the 1980s, you know, downsizing, graduating into a recession myself, you know, I think the employment contract got a little skewed, right? It got a little too one-sided with the organization. And now it's going to have to get a little bit rebalanced. Because you can't eliminate, you know, when people are working 60 to 100-hour work weeks, I'm sorry, but that's not right. You shouldn't be, right? And I think there's going to be some really interesting challenges to the employment contract and how we need to address things. So Diane had a question that was specifically about the team in Hong Kong. So how has returning to the office and then having to go back to working from home impacted the team in Hong Kong? Mental health impact, productivity, and because I think everybody's kind of predicting that we might have this happen now that we're in phase 3. Are we going to see the go in, go back out again? So any sort of lessons learned around that you could arm people with?
Yeah, listen, our Hong Kong team has gone through a lot with the rest of the people from Hong Kong. You had the protests and now you've got kind of the early days of a pandemic and back and forth a bit. The team's doing well. They were very excited when they got to go back. We initially phased them back in 2 cohorts. And then we eventually melded them into one cohort, and then unfortunately they're back at home. I think you know, it's giving them some hope that they've gone back before and now, you know, they understand. There's clarity around why they're not in the office, but also a little bit of hope around, you know, we did come back in, it worked well, it was fun to see everybody. And the Hong Kong, you know, there's a lot of very specific things related to Hong Kong. You know, they often live with extended families. There's, you know, smaller space. There are different rules around sort of mask wearing outside and in public. But it's a very social office as well. So we have a number of expats, but even some of our local hires where their social life is their colleagues. And so it's very, you know, not unlike London where kind of go to the office, then you might go to the pub afterwards. There's that culture there. So it's been tough for them, but our leaders managing through it. We're very connected. We've got a member of my team in Hong Kong who's on our crisis team, keeps us up to date, and you know, but we do recognize that they've got some unique challenges.
So I think I've got time for one last question. You guys, Thank you for all the great questions that are coming in fast and furious. I think we've been sort of hitting them as we're going along, but we've got like one last one coming, which I think is kind of an interesting one because we haven't talked too much about Zoom technology. We're all turning into Zoombies lately. So the question is, how do you manage culture, inclusion, and employee onboarding, if any, with the proliferation of technology in corporations? With remote work, Zoom calls, is there a lack of personal touch to the entire process? And because I don't think this is going away either, is it?
Yeah. So we had 60 co-op students who joined us in May, who we had hired before and then made a decision to continue with, and really had to pull together a virtual onboarding plan. How are we going to get them their laptops? How are we going to onboard them? What's the orientation? All of the compliance training, make sure that their managers are connected with them. Have they met their managers? So there was a lot of complexity in there. The team did a fabulous job of pulling all of that together, and I think has had a pretty high touch approach. It has meant absolutely more work or different work. It's a lot different to kind of pull that together, but it can work. And we have hired a number of people since the end of March. We've moved secondees in the middle of this very carefully. We had to wait for the right window, but we hired someone here in Canada, moved them to London. And so there's a bit of an all hands on deck when that happens. And, my team obviously plays a very big role in sort of helping to manage that. But so does the manager and the leader. So it can work. I think I was very worried about, our competitive advantage if we're out in the market looking for talent.
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to, bring people in? And we have been able to, and it's been a lot of work to be able to do that, but it's actually been pretty successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, we've had a few, because through the pandemic, we were hosting calls for our community, and we had several people that were starting new jobs. They, their first day was like the last day their office was open during the pandemic, or they were joining in, and it really does, you do have to think differently about what these experiences are like, and some of the traditional ways we get up to speed on employee culture and how we go about kind of assimilating things that you get through osmosis from just being in a culture and walking around the home. We really have to start to rethink a lot of that, I find.
Yeah. So. Yeah, exactly. I mean, onboarding and orientation is one piece of it, but we've got a lot of sort of social offshoots. So either they're organizational in the sense of their employee resource groups, but there's also interest groups that have emerged from COVID. There's virtual book clubs. There's virtual drinks. There's United Way. We did a lot of work for the United Way earlier this year, and so there's different people to get to kind of move people in and bring people in. And we've had a couple of people on our team who've started since this worked, and they seem to be right in there, hitting the ground running. They don't get the macro enterprise culture sense as quickly as they would had they been in the physical office, but I do think it's working.
Yeah. Well, it's such an adjustment, and as my 16-year-old said, this is going to be the experience of my lifetime, living through a pandemic, which is, I think, one of the best ways we can look at this. So, Beth, thank you so much. I'm going to do a couple of little closing remarks, but I want to thank you for being with us today and sort of sharing your perspective and expertise on how you're navigating it. This is a leader, but also the things that teachers are doing. I think you've given everybody on the call a lot of things to think about. So thanks so much for all of that.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun. Thanks for the questions too from everybody.
Yeah, fantastic questions. So just want to kind of wrap up really quickly before everybody goes. If you are new to the Roundtable, just to let you know, we're a coaching company, but what our focuses on is on groups and teams coaching together. I'm a very big fan of the collective and learning through a collective experience. And I think, as Beth said so nicely, we can't go it alone. And I think more so than ever. So we have sort of 3 offerings. If we can help any of you on the call with that, please let us know. I also want to kind of do a little plug for my new book, The Grassroots Leadership Revolution. Be sure to pick up a copy. It tells you how to do what, Beth, what you just said is really kind of create your own peer community of support and help you manage your leadership through. So that's available at Amazon. And then finally, I'll just let everybody know we've got our next session coming up in August is with longtime colleague of mine, Faith Clark. She's based in New York and is a diversity and inclusion expert. And we're going to be talking about how to build inclusive teams, which I think is on a lot of our minds lately. Certainly Faith did a session with our group and really got us thinking a lot about how we could be more inclusive, even in our programming as a business. So if you're interested in that, registration's open now. We'll be sending out a link later. But Beth, once again, thank you so much for being a part of this call today. And everybody, thank you. And oh, Zeb, look at you. I just caught your note recommending my book. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And we'll see everybody again soon. Thanks so much for coming out today and for all your great questions.
Thanks very much.
Bye, everybody.